There are very few offenses as bone-chillingly horrific as those of Richard Ramirez. As well known as this case is, there are still facts that even the most informed news buff doesn't know. Ready to hear the details? Let's go. Ricardo Leyva Muñoz Ramírez, known as Richard Ramirez, was born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas. From his first breath, he led a troubled life. In fact, his problems started before his first breath in the womb. His mother, Mercedes Ramirez, was a boot factory worker during her pregnancy with Richard and his 4 older siblings. She was constantly exposed to dangerous chemicals which caused birth defects in all of her children. We can only speculate on the effect this had on Richard's future actions. Mercedes and Richard's father, Julian, were Mexican immigrants who struggled to raise their family in impoverished conditions. Julian was an alcoholic and mistreated his children when he was drinking. Between the ages of 2 and 5, Richard experienced several major head traumas. A dresser fell on his head at age 2. At age 5, a swing knocked him unconscious. He developed epilepsy as a result and often had seizures. In his preteen years, Richard began spending time with his cousin Miguel, who had just returned home from the combat in Vietnam. Mike, as the Ramirez family called him, exposed Richard to narcotics and entertained him with stories of his time as a soldier. Most of these stories were of the horrifying violations he committed against Vietnamese women. Mike also tutored Richard on military stealth fighting techniques intended to seriously injure or take someone's life. It was also during this time that Mike took the life of his wife, Jessie, in front of young Richard. Mike claimed insanity and was released from the Texas State Mental Institution after only 4 years. He soon rekindled his relationship with his cousin Richard, by then in his early teens. Was the time Richard spent with Mike the beginning of his sick mind frame, or did it just add fuel to an already raging fire? We will never know. By this time, Richard was old enough to try to escape his brutish father and often slept in graveyards when he was on a drunken tirade. Richard dropped out of high school in the 9th grade and began committing neighborhood burglaries. He got a job at a Holiday Inn in 1975, where he used his master key to rummage through guests' belongings. And according to his friend, Eddie Malam, he was fired after attempting to harm 2 young children in the hotel elevator. Other reports say he attempted to violate a female guest, but her husband fought him off. They never reported the incident to police because they were visitors to El Paso and did not want to stay for a trial. Had the hotel or the visiting couple reported these violations to police, would Richard have been able to leave his fruitful legacy? He was arrested for possession of a controlled substance in 1977. And in the early part of the 1980s, Richard decided it was time to get out of Texas and moved to California. That's when the real destruction began. Thanks in part to his own relatives and upbringing, Richard had serious substance abuse issues, was an accomplished thief who had attacked a woman, and he was now on the road. After arriving in California, Richard drifted between LA and San Francisco, where he survived on odd jobs and burglaries. In 1981, he was arrested for attempting to steal a car and spent some time in jail. By 1984, he was on the street again, living in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, 6 blocks away from his first target, elementary school student Mei Leung. She and her brother had wandered into their apartment's basement to hunt for a lost dollar bill when they were separated for about 30 minutes, when she was discovered hanging from a pipe, violated and punctured by a sharp object. The police were never able to find a suspect. The case remained cold until 2009, when DNA finally linked Richard to the case. What hasn't been widely publicized about this find is that a second DNA profile was also discovered. Could Richard have had an accomplice? In 2012, the second DNA profile was linked to a convicted felon that would have still been a juvenile in 1984. There wasn't enough evidence to charge him with a crime or prove that he had helped in any of Richard's other felonies. In June 1984, Richard committed what was long considered to be his first serious offense until the connection to Mei Leung was discovered. The vicious attack against 79-year-old widow Jennie Vincow. 8 months later, he attacked his second California target, 34-year-old Dale Okazasi. She did not survive, but her roommate, 20-year-old Maria Hernandez, did. Police now had a description of the assailant. On the same day the women were attacked, Richard dragged Leon Veronica Yu, 30, out of her car and ended her life. 10 days later, Richard broke into the home of 60-year-old Vincent Zasara and his wife Maxine as they lay sleeping and took their lives. In May 1985, Richard broke into the home of William Doi, 65, and took his life with a fatal gunshot blast. Mary Louise Cannon was next. The 77-year-old widow was also found lifeless in her home, this time in Arcadia, California, on July 2nd. On July 7th, Joyce Lucille Nelson lost her life to the brutal beating Richard handed out. 68-year-old Max Needling and his wife Leyva were found on July 20th. They had been brutally beaten and attacked with a machete, as well as riddled with gunshots. Richard's last known target was 31-year-old Elyas Abowath, who suffered a fatal gunshot on August 8th in Diamond Bar, California. With every target ferociously violated with stunning vulgarity, some forced to swear allegiance to evil forces and satanic symbols left in their homes. The media had a field day and soon dubbed the unnamed suspect the Night Stalker. The public was terrified, and the sales of firearms surged. As the number of devastating casualties mounted, police launched a full-scale investigation. With help from survivors of his attacks and fingerprint evidence, police were eventually able to identify their suspect as Richard Ramirez. A police photo was distributed 6 days after his last feral act, and soon all of Los Angeles was on high alert. On August 31st, 1985, only 1 day after the photo was released, a man spotted Richard in East LA as he was trying to steal a car. Dozens of people began to simultaneously recognize him. He tried to run, but crowds gathered around, beating and holding him down until police arrived. Richard first admitted to his crime, saying, "I did it, you know? You guys got me, the stalker. Of course I did it. You know that I'm a killer." Soon, however, he changed his plea to not guilty, but refused to let his lawyers plead insanity. The trial was delayed for years with several problems. When it finally started in 1988, Richard appeared unaffected in court. He even flashed a pentagram he'd drawn on his palm and often waved to the groupies who gathered to watch. 4 years after his last evil deed, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was sentenced to death in September 1989. This hardly seemed to register to him as he left the courtroom with his now famous line, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." Continuing legal challenges on the death penalty kept him wasting away in prison for decades. His many illnesses, brought on by a lifetime of bad habits, kept him sick. But that didn't keep him from causing problems with staff and other inmates, including fighting and exposing himself to guards. In his final years, Richard stopped going into the prison yard and refused visitors as his health declined. When he did become a bit of a recluse, there were a few people he still stayed in contact with. One of those was crime author Kelly Banaski, who has given several interviews on their interactions. In a description of their last phone call, only weeks before he died in prison of B-cell lymphoma, a cancer affecting the lymphatic system, she said, "He always started our conversations by asking about my personal life in some offbeat way. He would ask what was in my refrigerator, or what time I got up that morning." She described his regular conversation voice as grandfatherly and jovial. But this time, there was a change. I'd been talking to him for years, and he was always cagey about why he was in prison, changing the subject and talking in circles. I felt brave that day and decided to push it. I asked him if he would have hurt me had I known him back in the day. There was a long pause before he answered. When he spoke again, the grandfatherly tone I had always heard was gone. "Do you think you're special, Kelly?" he asked me. "Do you think we are friends?" Of course I would have. He laughed at me then, a rich, deep, bellowing laugh that didn't sound sick or weak at all. Tears sprang up in my eyes and I told him, "No, Richard, we are not friends, more like teacher and student, I would say." I hope I sounded bold and confident, although I didn't feel it. My insides were shaking, said Banaski. Richard Ramirez died in a prison hospital on June 7th, 2013. He was 53. Do you think Richard was born to do the things he did? Or was it something that happened as he experienced one horrendous event after another throughout his life? Richard himself points to such instances, saying people like him come about after things like poverty and severe mistreatment as a child contribute to a person's frustration and anger at the world until they explode. But he never placed blame. Instead, he admitted that people have the choice to become what they want to be. What do you think? Leave your comments below and get in on the conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out our other videos for more crazy content with a creepy vibe.